Welcome everybody to the latest edition of CNF Talks, which is a series of interviews we conduct with speakers at our forthcoming events. My name is Maurice Button, and today I have the pleasure of having Dr. Ruth Wandhöfer, who's a Global FinTech 50 influencer, speaks as a keynote speaker at various conferences, and is also an NED at Aquis Exchange here in London. Ruth's going to be speaking at the Data and the Future of Financial Services Summit, which is being held in London on the 19th of June. Ruth, welcome.
Thank you, Maurice. Welcome. Hello, everybody.
Very good to have you with us. Let's turn to our first question. In your recent report from FinTech to Ubiquitech, Accelerating the Wider UK Digital Economy, you state that FinTech is the first stage towards a complete digitalization of the UK economy. What do you see as the various stages or milestones in that process? How well positioned is the UK to achieve digitalization or Ubiquitech in comparison to other countries such as, say, Singapore and China?
Yeah, so let me set the scene briefly here. The observation is that we are no longer in just a normal economy of goods and services. We are actually living in a data economy where data has become the key asset, both in terms of generating value, but also because of the communication networks and the ability to protect the data asset, just if we think about data privacy or data hacks. And so the idea of this report is actually to identify a number of key pillars that need to be in place for the UK to accelerate its journey into a digital economy that can truly benefit from the data economy side. A core one here, and I might just quickly give you an outline of these 5 key pillars, is of course network availability, having a network across the country that is at speed. Leveling up can only happen if you can be productive as much in the north as in the south of the country. Having that in a resilient way in light of the net zero targets that we're all operating towards. Having a secure data highway, cybersecurity and fraud controls becoming more and more important. Allowing, of course, for the verification of individuals' assets and organizations, something that we haven't been completely consistent on, digital inclusion and skills, and also the whole regulatory context we're operating within at the moment, in particular also in view of the recently adopted Electronic Digital Trade Documentation Act, which allows us to actually build this out into a global reliable system.
Okay.
Maybe quickly on Singapore and China, very briefly,
yes.
To a certain extent, we're certainly not at the level of Singapore when it comes to having that Ubiquitech in place to allow everybody in the population to benefit from the data highways. And there's certainly also elements such as a digital sterling that the Bank of England is working on, which can, of course, only be put into practice if you have digital connectivity across the country.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I suppose in areas like Singapore and China, Ubiquitech is easier to achieve in some senses, in that issues around privacy and so on are viewed in a slightly different way. And I suppose that takes me really to the next question. Data is at the heart of your vision. How can we improve its protection? Not a day passes here without seeing a story of another cyber attack or fraud. And how can cybersecurity and anti-fraud measures be boosted to make wider digitalization less vulnerable?
Yeah, certainly on the fraud aspect, we actually have been leading the global standards around secure customer authentication as the United Kingdom. We have, however, even if you look at the banking industry, not a consistent implementation of these existing global standards. So one thing is to actually get the industry up to that next level and make sure they are in place. The second key piece is, of course, that we are in a data economy where it's no longer just the financial sector looking after our money, value, and data transfers. We have key global players such as social media platforms, which actually, when we think about the fraud dimension here, are a key source of, for example, the authorized push payment scams that we've seen rise exponentially in the UK. 80% of these app scams originate from Meta, as an example. So we need to rethink the way that we create obligations, regulatory and supervisory wise, to include these new players, because they all have a key stake and liability in the data economy. And that is the way to then actually more securely protect the data, but also ensure that we can fight the fraud that has been growing exponentially, because at the moment it's just the banking industry being liable. So we need to look at new paradigms of financial crime intelligence sharing, collaboration, but also regulatory obligations, which is something that we hope to see come through in your next question.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what I was going to turn to. I mean, regulation is one thing, but in terms of the legal framework, I'm not sure, whether Ubiquitech is capable of working with the current legal framework. Do you think that there needs to be a more comprehensive approach to the law to cover all the issues which you identify in your report, so that it can really take off, particularly in relation, say, to international trade, which is one of the areas you look at in the report?
Yes, so we've now in the last few years adopted a number of key acts, but the most important one that is still in the final stages of negotiation is the Digital Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, because that is the act ultimately that will link every other bill, every other act together, because it links to the data and how you handle the data. So whether you want to effectively fight economic crime and corporate transparency with the Economic Crime Corporate Transparency Act, if you want to make sure you protect individuals with the Online Safety Act, these are all data related, but will come to the fore in terms of the DPDI at this stage. So we need the clear signposting. We helpfully have concepts such as failure to prevent in the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, for example. So a failure to prevent could, for example, be not to share information under the DPDI if it is important for fighting fraud, financial crime, or individual data protection. And these, of course, then suddenly link in a lot more players in the corporate context than just the banks. So if we get to a clear signposting in DPDI and a more holistic approach in interpreting all of these acts ultimately to make sure that anybody who fails to prevent to share data where it has to be shared in order to fight crime, such as I have a new WhatsApp contact, this contact happens to be the one I'm suddenly paying £10,000 to, which is completely at odds with my normal behavior. This should come from the social media side into the data sharing piece. And that's something we're working on at the moment. I think taking it up one more level, as I said at the beginning, we are now in a data economy. We know very well the senior managers regime from the financial services industry post-crisis, but ultimately you would need accountability regimes like that also in new areas such as social media, which are having such a crucial role they're playing in this overall data economy.
Yeah. I'm sure that's quite a challenge with the social media companies. For them, their data is their lifeblood, isn't it? And being able to share that more widely will be a bit of a challenge. But finally, the rapid rollout of Gen AI is obviously both a facilitator of greater digitalization and potentially a threat in the hands of bad actors who are now able to manipulate data in ways previously probably never conceived. How can the risks be protected against whilst facilitating the opportunities?
Yeah, so just any new technology is, of course, immediately being exploited by organized crime first. So that's not new.
Absolutely.
AI exists since the 1960s, so that's not new either. Gen AI is slightly newer in terms of how we configure certain things. The issue here is that, of course, it's the old principle of garbage in, garbage out. AI is very successfully in the Gen AI space today used for fraudsters to share malware code because it's a platform to share data and it's open source. So anybody can put in, anybody can put out. But equally, when we think about applying it in a more useful context, we have to be very mindful that the input is from the web. And there are lots of fake news and lots of misrepresentations in the web. So you cannot rely ever 100% or even 80% on the outputs you're using here. And I would just recommend to anybody that is thinking about leveraging such a technology for their institution to find very, very clear implementations and guardrails to make sure that you're not dependent directly on an open source software, which has its own cybersecurity vulnerabilities from day one.
So do you care? It's the same old problem, but with a new technology. Ruth, very nice to have this opportunity to chat to you. For our viewers, if you'd like to hear more on this area and related issues, please do attend the Data and Future of Financial Services Summit in London on the 19th of June. Further information is available on the City and Financial Global website. Ruth, thank you very much for sharing those insights with us.
Thank you, Maurice.